Good afternoon. My name is Liz DeMar, and I am an account manager for Hireology. Today I'm going to cover interviewing inside your Hireology account. Hireology's patented three-step interviewing process is a proven way to hire the right person. The research and science that drives the interviewing tool tells Hireology users why they should or shouldn't hire a candidate. Here's what you will learn during this webinar. You will learn where to find the interviewing tools in your Hireology account, how many interviews you should conduct, how Hireology's interviews are created, and why the achievements and the elements interviews are important. Before we dive into the app, please allow me to introduce you to Hireology's 3 award-winning interviews: the phone screen, which is an interview that's conducted on the phone, the achievements interview, which is a resume review, as well as the elements interview, which is a behavioral-based interview guide. So now that you know what each interview uncovers with candidates, you're probably wondering how each interview is created for your job family. In order to answer that question, we'll have to switch over to the Hireology platform. Okay, so now we are in the Hireology account, and so what you'll see is all of your different jobs that are listed here. And my mouse is going a little wacky, so I'm going to pause that so that you can really see what's happening here. So in your Hireology account, under the Jobs and the Candidates tab, that's where you're going to see all of your open jobs. To begin the interview process, click on the name of the job that you're interested in interviewing candidates for. When you click on the name of the job, you'll wind up being taken to the candidate repository. This is where all of your candidates will appear, and this is where you'll be able to review their resumes and their applications in the Identify tab. And that second tab over is the Interview tab, and that's where you'll have access to all 3 of those guides that I mentioned a few moments ago. So the first is a phone screen. Again, it's intended to be conducted over the phone, and the 3 guides are presented in exactly the order that they are intended to be used. So the phone screen is conducted on the phone with the candidate, and then the achievements and the elements interviews are both designed to be in-person discussions. So to initiate this guide, what you'll do is you'll locate the appropriate name of the candidate who you'd like to conduct an interview with. So we're going to start with Prince Charming. We'd like to do a phone screen, so we're going to click on that phone icon, and what you'll see is a PDF document that will appear. What's really nice is it will auto-populate all of the candidates' information so that you don't have to do that. Everything's right here for you, and you don't have to remember who you're speaking with. What we have are 2 options. We typically recommend that you conduct the interview electronically. You'll see that we give you a fully scripted guide. We even pull in the candidate's first name. We'll even pull in your name so that you don't forget to say who you are, as well as what company you're from. Moving on to the meat of the content here, you'll see we give you questions to ask, and then in these big boxes, these are actually text boxes for you to take notes as your candidate is giving their answers. We certainly recommend that you take notes, especially if you're having several discussions with many different candidates. It's easy to get these notes misplaced, so we definitely recommend that you do this electronically. However, if you're uncomfortable with taking notes and typing while you're listening on the phone, we do give you the option to print the guide so that you can take handwritten notes instead. What we want to make sure that everyone understands that if you decide to print the guide and take handwritten notes, that you, after the interview concludes, that you come back into your Hireology account and you open up this guide. You're certainly not required to re-enter your notes by any means, even though it is nice to have everything in one place. We want you to make sure to take advantage of the scoring mechanism that we provide for you. So this interview guide specifically is a pretty comprehensive tool. It covers several different areas, and you're going to learn some interesting facts about your candidates right from the bat. The first question I'd always really like to talk about is actually number 14. It's I'm sorry, it's number 15. What would you say is the biggest misperception that people have of you? And the reason why we like this question so much is because it reveals a lot about a candidate. A candidate will typically tell you something that might not necessarily be the most flattering, but it's typically true. It's a nicer way of asking, what are some of your weaknesses? And I promise you'll get some fun answers, so definitely make sure to ask that one. So after you've asked the questions and you've taken all of your notes, you'll conclude the conversation with the candidate, and you'll continue to scroll down the page about three-fourths of the way down. You'll then see in green text that there's a section that says Phone Screen Scorecard. And this is where you're going to actually score your discussion with your candidate. This allows you to make a hiring decision whether you wish to proceed with a candidate or not based on quantifiable data rather than a gut feeling or an initial reaction. So again, this is not for the candidate to see. This is just for you internally. Based on your conversation, you're going to be able to assign one of these answers to these different criteria sections. So for example, analytics and problem solving. A strong candidate definitely came prepared with a great understanding of your company, of the role, of the different duties and responsibilities. They ask insightful questions and certainly appear to have done their homework. They researched you online, they looked at your website. They haven't just gone through the motions. So you would certainly then fill in strong if that's how you felt your candidate came prepared to the conversation. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to fill in these bubbles randomly, but it is important that you're honest because our system understands, based on the job that you're hiring for, which of these competencies are most critical and then weights them accordingly. So make sure to be really honest when you're answering this, because again, this is just an internal document that your candidate will never see. So when you're finished filling in one bubble for each of these different competency sections, you'll see at the very bottom of the page there's a big orange button that says Calculate and Save Score. And so after we're finished filling these in, we're going to then click Calculate and Save Score to get that rating for this candidate. So you'll see that Prince Charming just scored a 96%. And in green text, you'll see low risk. Sometimes that can be somewhat misleading. Green is good, so just remember that. And low risk means that they're low risk for being a bad candidate. So we would certainly recommend that you would proceed in the interview process with this candidate. And if you ever have any questions moving forward about what that score means, you can always click this helpful link just underneath the score. So when we're finished with the interview, we'll click Done. And what's really nice is that your notes will all be saved in your interview guide. And the percentage for that candidate will be reflected on this interview page. So you'll know that Prince Charming had his phone interview and he scored a 96%. You'll notice that if a candidate doesn't score well on an interview, let's see, Lollipop Man scored a 34% on their phone screen, and Daffy Duck scored a 60% on the Elements interview. We would certainly recommend that when you see that red score, that candidate would be considered high risk. And we would recommend typically that you don't proceed in the interview process. And it's not to say that 100% of the time somebody who always scores in the red isn't going to be a good candidate. It's just far more unlikely that they're going to be a good fit. So that is the phone screen in a nutshell. The next interview is the achievements interview, and this is designed to be a full resume review to give you a really full and comprehensive understanding of a candidate's previous experiences. This interview is an often overlooked but very important guide because it's really going to give you a clear understanding of what your candidate has done and what they can bring to the table. So again, to initiate the achievements interview, what you'll do is you'll click on that yellow icon, and you'll see that a very similar PDF document will populate, just like the phone screen. Again, you'll see that all of the information for the candidate will auto-populate here, and if you want to print the guide to take handwritten notes, you can certainly do so. And I know that a lot of our clients do feel more comfortable, especially sitting across face-to-face with the candidate. But certainly if you're comfortable typing, absolutely, we recommend that you do this electronically. So this guide in particular happens to be loosely inspired by a methodology of interviewing that's called top grading. And top grading essentially is a methodology in which interview questions start broad and they become more specific as the interview progresses. And this is done for a couple of different reasons. The first is to build rapport. It's to certainly help you relate to the candidate and the candidate relate to you, to put everyone at ease. When people are at ease, they're certainly more talkative and they are more eager to share their different experiences. So it really lightens the mood and it helps to get everyone comfortable in what could be a somewhat tense conversation. If a conversation does stay somewhat tense and the candidate is only answering questions that they're asked, it's typically less likely that you'll wind up getting as full of a picture of this candidate. So it's a good thing to start broad and continue and get more specific as the interview goes on. So that's why you'll see that this interview guide happens to start with high school. The number one question I always receive when explaining this interview guide is, well, why would we want to talk about high school? We're talking about a professional experience. So the reason that we would start with high school, number one, is to certainly build rapport and get everyone comfortable. High school is typically a non-threatening topic of conversation. But it's also to help you as the interviewer understand and infer certain tendencies that are probably hardwired into this candidate. For example, has this candidate always approached problems or challenges or homework even in a very strategic and organized and planned manner? Or have they always been one of those people who tends to procrastinate, maybe wait till the last minute and wing it as they go along? Those types of traits and those types of ways of approaching problems are typically hardwired into a person's makeup. So you'll certainly be able to understand some of those hardwired tendencies and behaviors just from discussing high school. If, for whatever reason, you don't care to talk about high school, the most important thing that we always recommend about this interview is to get that full picture of your candidate's experience is that you cover 3 different experience areas. So by default, we have set this up so that you'll ask questions about high school, and then the next section is about college, and you'll see as soon as I'm scrolling down, and this interview guide you actually do score as you go along. Again, if you are uncomfortable doing the scoring part or even the interview electronically, you can certainly come back to this as soon as your candidate leaves. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this for the sake of time. We'll put in these bubbles, and we'll say yes and yes. And then you'll see the next section is college, and then the third section will be a professional work experience, number 1. I often am asked, well, what happens if I'm speaking with a candidate who didn't go to college? It wouldn't really be appropriate then to start asking questions about their college experience and make them feel uncomfortable. So the nice thing is about this interview guide, you'll see that you can actually delete certain sections, and that will make it so that the section you don't care to talk about or that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate will be removed, and it will only apply to the specific candidate whose interview guide you happen to have open. It won't apply to everyone, so it's somewhat customizable in that regard. So I'll show you what happens if you decided to delete this section. You'll be asked to confirm, and we'll say yes. And then you'll see that the next experience is a professional experience. So you would just go on and ask questions about work. And again, you can fill in these text boxes here. And then you'll see that you'll be asked to score the discussion as you complete each section. So again, after the work experience concludes, you'll be asked to score this. And again, you certainly don't have to by any means while the interviewer is across the desk or the table from you. So we'll continue, and just make sure, again, that if you do decide to remove high school and or college, that you go ahead and add another work experience. And all you have to do is press that button that says add another work experience, and that way you'll have a second professional job so that you're really covering those 3 different life experience areas. And it's going to give you a really nice full picture of the candidate's history. So we're going to go ahead and score this, and you'll see that there's one final section then on the goals of the candidate. and then we will be able to score this this interview as well. So now we'll go to goals. We can ask our final questions, and you'll be asked these last couple of questions, and we'll say calculate and save score. So this candidate, Prince Charming, scored an 85% on their achievements interview, and we would certainly recommend that you proceed in this interview process. So we can now click done, and again you'll see that Prince Charming, that achievements interview has been scored, and it's reflected here. The final interview guide is the elements interview, and this is a behavioral-based guide. So these questions are certainly those that most of us are very familiar with. Tell me about a time when you were in a particularly challenging situation. How did you deal with it? What did you do to overcome that? Or if you were in a super stressful situation, how would you overcome that? So those are those situational and behavioral questions. And again, to initiate that interview, we'll just click on the elements icon. You'll see that the look and feel is very much the same. What I do want to point out is that you can actually keep track of your candidate communication, so who you've contacted for each interview and who you actually have an interview scheduled with. And you could also do this for the phone screen as well as the achievements interview. If you look above the document, all the way on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that there's a drop-down that says Candidate Communication. So let's say that you reached out to Prince Charming to schedule the elements interview, but you haven't heard back from Prince Charming yet, but you want to at least notate that you've reached out. You can click the down arrow of this drop-down, and you can change it. Instead of saying not contacted, you can change it to contacted. And then you can click done. And then you'll see that here reflected in that repository, you'll be able to keep track of where you're at and who you've contacted. And then when you actually want to go ahead and conduct the interview, you would just click on that icon again to pull up that PDF guide. So again, just like the other two interview guides, all the candidates' information auto-populates in the document. And a lot of our clients like this interview guide the best. Not only do we give you questions to ask, we give you that text box to take notes. We actually also give you a roadmap, or what I like to call an interviewing guide for dummies. We give you a roadmap, and we spell out what you should be looking for in an answer from your candidate. What type of answer would what would make it excellent, what would make an answer good, what would make it okay, and what would make it poor. And for whatever reason, if you decide not to ask a question, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure that you fill in that bubble so that it doesn't affect the scoring mechanism. So just to take this first question, for example, what's something that motivates you? It's a great question. An excellent answer would be that if the candidate lists a motivator that will be present in the job or the company. So let's say, for example, if you're hiring a salesperson for a completely commission-based salary, you would certainly want that candidate to mention something about, winning really motivates that person, that they really like to be the best, and they will do whatever they need to and put in whatever work they've got to close those sales. Or, I really am motivated by a great compensation, and I know that my direct input will certainly affect my output. So this is a wonderful interview guide, and again, this is you score it as you go along, but you certainly don't have to if you take handwritten notes. You can certainly come back in and score this all at the very end. So those are the 3 interview guides, and it's really important to do 3 interviews, mainly because you get to know the candidate more and more as your interview sessions progress. But they're also, as you can tell, very focused on different aspects of the interviewing process. Having that really great sense of comfort helps to make a more free-flowing discussion so that you're getting that full understanding of the candidate's experience, and you're not limited just by specific questions about past situations or past work performances. It's a really nice, complete overview of who this person really is. So you may be wondering, as I said before, these questions are great. How are they generated? How is it determined which questions are asked? Are all the same questions asked for every role? And the answer is no. Much of what's included in the content of these guides is based on the information that you've set up when you first created your job profiles. So I'm going to go ahead. I happen to have the job setup page open. When you click Add a New Job, you probably remember that you were first asked to choose a position from one of these job families. That's one of the factors in determining a lot of the different questions and a lot of the different competencies that are most critical for the role that you're hiring for. So for example, I started to do this. We'll say we're hiring for a salesperson. You'll then remember that we walk you through an entire process about the different specifications for this role. We then click Continue, and then we put in our job description, and we click Update. And you probably recall, or if you haven't seen this yet, you will certainly see this job analysis. This is a set of true and false questions that you're required to answer in order to open up your job profile. And based on the way that you answer these questions, also generates and contributes to the competencies that are most important for a role, as well as which questions are included in the different interview guides. So it's important that you fill these out honestly. They can't be changed. The answers can't be changed, rather, when the position is open. But certainly don't stress. I would always go with your first initial reaction to answer the question. So we would go ahead and fill out those bubbles here, and then we would click Submit, and we'd say OK. And then you'll see we'll change that job from pending. We change it to open. You will be able to open up your job and post to different job boards. But the most important thing that I want to show you, just for your reference, if you are ever curious about the different competencies that are most important for your role, you'll always be able to go to the right-hand side of your screen, and right underneath that orange button that says Post to a Job Board, you'll see that there are job reports. If you click on Job Analysis PDF, that will provide for you the ways that you answered all of those true and false questions in the analysis, and it also discusses the different competencies that are critical for your role. So I'm going to open up this document here, and again, this is always available from your Hireology account. Cancel, but you'll be able to see all the different job specifics, the elements of success, so these are the different competencies and what they mean. And then that second page is all the true-false questions in that job analysis. So hopefully that helps to clarify where you can find the different interview guides, why those 3 interviews are so important, and the best way to maximize your Hireology account. So this concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for your time today, and I welcome you and encourage you to please contact me with any further questions. You'll see my phone number is provided, as well as my email, 312-253-9245. Thanks so much, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Happy hiring.